Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the 49ers as of 1:52 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, March 16th. And it doesn't feel like, so we both we both missed on whether he'd be traded by yesterday morning. And it doesn't feel like he's getting traded in the next hour or two at this point.
I texted a buddy last night. I'm like, would you be totally shocked if he got like a 3-year extension? Kind of tongue-in-cheek, but kind of there's a hint of seriousness. Let's face it. Like, oh, how did they clear all the cap space? Did they trade or cut Jimmy? No, they restructured a bunch of other contracts, right? Eric Armstead, George Kittle, they moved money around to facilitate keeping Jimmy Garoppolo. They did that on purpose. Like, obviously, if you got rid of Jimmy, they wouldn't have had to kick the can down the road. So, like, listen, this could have ramifications on one of those two guys if they have a major injury. This is the NFL. I mean, both those guys play physical positions. We've seen it with a counterpart. They are still kicking the can down the road on D Ford. Now, I would say half the teams in the league would not have done this, even out of loyalty. I think they generally like the guy, right? And they would. Like, I think if you ask Kyle right now, he's like, I'd have no problem bringing him back. Like, dead serious. Like, zero hint of sarcasm or tongue-in-cheek or whatever. Like, I will start Jimmy Garoppolo next year. Serious as a fucking heart attack. Where I think, like, John Lynch, Parag, Jed, just the natural inclination of everyone else non-coach is in one to just kind of wheeling and dealing and adding assets, you know, and like increasing your value of the team. But they don't have to coach the quarterback. But this is like when you just take a step back, a little bizarre, I would say. And just most importantly, besides just bizarre, weird, a little fucking risky. You know, they haven't necessarily missed out on a guy. We'll get to Chandler Jones. Like, Chandler Jones would have immediately helped. Now, we'll see the guaranteed money, but he probably got a lot, right? I mean, he got $51 million. They say like 17 a year. I think it's fair to guess that 30 guaranteed, like amount of money that the Niners probably were not willing to pay him. So that might not have been an option, but it for 100% sure was not even a conversation as long as Jimmy's on the team. Like, you can't have conversations with, because if I told you right now the Niners also signed Stephon Gilmore, everyone would be like, fuck, multiple corners? It's not even an option. Like, you can't even have these conversations with anyone out there. And listen, I've said over and over, free agency, this is not, you're not going to land Carlos Correa or Garrett Cole in NFL free agency. But you can add pretty good starters. But when the Niners are not like $40 million of wiggle room right now. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo takes up 27 point whatever million dollars. That's a fact as of right now, right? That's a lot of money.
Yep.
That's a large amount of money. Like, the only person that takes up that much money in football are second contract quarterbacks. Like, no other position has that level of cap hit, right? It's impossible. Like, even Khalil's like, they traded for a lot. And you looked, it's like $17 million. That's $10 million less. Like, $10 million buys you a sweet safety, a sweet guard. Like, you're talking, this is a lot of money. So they are taking a calculated risk with their puzzle piece. And this is by far their biggest puzzle piece to move, because they could cut him, right?
They could.
And then they get that money back when the moment he signs.
They get all of it back once he signs, the other 7.5, right?
They'd still have 20 to play with immediately.
Yeah, and so now you've pushed some of these cap hits back, right, on. Now, there's always maneuvering to be done, and they do the maneuvering, but the numbers.
And ideally, Armstead and Kittle are on your team for a couple more years. Right?
Ideally, they're healthy, like you said. Ideally, they're not hurt. I mean, but
things change fast.
But I think the other thing, I think you said it, a couple more years, right? Like Armstead, there will be a time where even if he's productive, you could get to a point where Armstead's cap hit is so big that even for a productive player, I think these numbers have been updated. His number this year, Armstead, is now $9.5 million. Does that sound right?
I mean, yeah, I think
that sounds like his new cap number, right? I'm just looking at Spot Track. I think that's been updated. His cap hit next year is $24 million.
Which will kick that can down the road.
Well, but the next year it's 25. So I mean, this could be his last year on the 49ers.
What's his dead cap next year?
21. So maybe not.
I would say the only way he stays is if he's good this year and they give him like a couple year extension. Because he is, the one thing you'd say about Eric Armstead, it feels like he's been in the league a decade. He is 28 years old.
Right.
He's a younger
29,
player.
I think.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, so if you extend him after this year and you play 31, 30, 31, 32, like, that's not Calais Campbell. You would say his physical type, right? He could just play for a while. He's a unique body, right?
And it does seem like he's coming in. The way he is performing feels like he has entered his prime and he is delivering.
He is a solid member of a really good team, right?
I'd call him solid plus. Like I think he's
above average.
He's gotten pretty good, I would say. He's pretty good.
He's been an impact player for the Niners in big boy games.
Yeah.
Which is hard to find.
This is all I think the question, here's the hard thing that we have trying to evaluate from the outside. How much of a gamble are the 49ers taking? Like, do they believe once Deshaun Watson picks a team that they're going to be able to trade Jimmy Garoppolo for something significant? And how confident are they in that? And why are they confident in that, right? Are they at all biting their fingernails right now going, we're holding. What are we ultimately going to get for this guy? And we'll talk about Cleveland in a minute. But, I think that's the one thing that's hard to know right now. From the outside, there is a lot of uneasiness about how much of a gamble they're making here.
Well, let's use the hypothetical that they have to cut him in a week, right? He's cut. They will get a lot of blowback, and I think it'll be justified of why didn't you do this immediately? You waited. You could have bought some players to help you out. What would the Rams have done? They would have utilized their space. They always do. You're not playing the same game as the team. Let's face it right now. You're competing against three teams. The Rams, who will do absolutely everything to keep winning. Tampa Bay Bucks, they are fucking spending money out of their ass. And Green Bay, somewhere in the middle, but they've kept their two most important players, right? So it's like, to me, that's who you're competing against, those three teams. What's their mindset? Green Bay's a little unique because they just got Aaron, right? But the other two teams are, I would say, operating like the Yankees, the Red Sox, or the Dodgers, wouldn't you? Just the way that they conduct business. Like, they're not like, I wonder about this and saving this. Like, they're just, pow, 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 pow. And you can be like, oh, that's not the smart way. Well, it's fucking working. Like, and that's your competition. So it's like, you can play this slow game, which historically, there's nothing wrong with it. But there's also like, you got to beat them. That's who you got to beat. Now, the Rams lost players yesterday. They lost a corner. They lost a D tackle. Von Miller, who knows if he's going to come back or not. But that's not the point. Like, they will continue to do everything humanly possible to improve. And I think sometimes I refuse to freak out. Like, I just seen a lot of people today, like, this is not the day to totally freak out. But I do understand just the mindset, because it does feel like the 49ers will always lean prudent over just gunslinger at the blackjack table like the Rams, right? And I'd say the Bucs with Tom Brady are operating like that too. The Niners just fundamentally do not work that way. Because ultimately the Trey Lance, while it's a big ballsy play, it is a big picture play, right?
It is, but it wasn't their first choice. Their first choice was ballsy, trade everything for Matthew Stafford or Deshaun Watson. Like, that was their first choice, right? Their first choice was Matthew Stafford or Deshaun Watson.
But okay, here's another pushback. Let's put the quarterback
pre
I know
accusation Deshaun.
Let's use the quarterback acquisition spending mindset in its own category. Because wouldn't you say that most teams, like, you got the non in trouble, Deshaun Watson,
right,
Russell Wilson, everyone's going to think the same. I would say every other player, that's where there's a group of, like, the haves and the have-nots of super aggressive and super not aggressive, right? Like, only so many. I bet a lot of people would have been like, yeah, that's a little too rich for Khalil Mack. But the ballsy teams, like, fuck that. Like, the Rams, I think the Chargers just realized there's some desperate, like, we got to be good. We got to make the playoffs. I think Tampa would have, if money, they would have been interested in Khalil Mack, right? I'm just using these teams. I think Howie was probably sniffing around. You just know the teams that at any moment be like, let's do it. Where I would say the Niners tend to just slow and steady win the race. And I think they would come back and say, it has brought us 4 playoff victories over the last 3 years, right? So it's not like
2 conference championship games.
But that is their fundamental mindset, slow and steady, I would say.
They 19, they made a trade, right, during the year for Emmanuel Sanders. I'm not saying that's this, but, they have, what would we say, accentuated the roster. I mean, D4 did not work. But they made that deal, right? And that was...
You would say a couple of their ballsy non-quarterback moves have blown up in their face. I mean, D Ford has been a disaster. I would say their first move, it's a draft move, but it was a really aggressive to get a second first-round pick, and Reuben Foster was one of the most disastrous things we've ever seen. Then they tried to get kind of cute in an aggressive way when they traded Buckner, and I think it just hasn't been ideal, even though it's had some positives, right? It's just, who knows if they had a do-over, how they'd talk about that. They'd be like, well, we probably would have moved this guy instead. And,
Yeah.
I don't know.
A part of
Maybe
it's
it's just
dependent on
simple as-
Kinlaw, which right now that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And I think part of this is like and you've always pointed this out. The Rams are
they gave McKinnon a bunch of money towards ACL twice.
good for Andy though.
I think I just saw he signed somewhere today.
Buffalo? No, is that right?
I feel like
People thought that, but who's the guy from the Washington football team? Then went to Buffalo and then decided to stay with Washington. That happened today.
Missed that one.
Did you Google something already?
Jerick McKinnon, but nothing came up.
Usually the comments can help me here, but I always type in WFT. McKissick, thank you. JD McKissick went to Buffalo. Thanks,
Gotcha.
Jamil, and thanks, Todd, and thanks, Michael, and thanks, Jamil, and thanks, Nate. Went to Buffalo and then changed his mind, went back to football team commies for the same amount, for the same deal. I guess he'd rather play with Wentz than Josh Allen. But what I was going to say is that this thing has not played itself out yet. And my read on the Niners right now, my guess, John, it's just a guess, is that they are confident that they're going to get something. And I know from the outside it looks like the Jimmy market, and this is a good comment here from Mr. Corey. Where did this go? First, it was the Rodgers situation. Then it was waiting on Russell. Now it's on Watts. And face it, Garoppolo is not that good, and are most other teams plan C. And I think the Niners' attitude is, okay, we're playing C, but they are going to get to us eventually.
Well, to take what
you're
you
right,
just said,
cutting them next week is
there
a
is
lot of
like
egg.
Getting something, like to me, getting a 5th-round pick, you get no credit next week. It's like, what would you wait this long for a 5th-round pick? When you say get something, I think you mean like a top 75 pick. Yeah. Something of some value.
Yeah, I would say at this point, even a 4th would feel like, see, we didn't cut him, and we were right.
I would say a 4th today wouldn't feel the worst. I'd say a 4th like next Thursday feels a little weird, doesn't it? It's like, wait, you just
so
you
dependent on
you could have utilized the money.
Well, that's what it's so dependent on. Would you have utilized the money? They might be sitting there going, no, we're not. I don't see anybody. We got our corner. I don't see anybody else we want for $15 million.
We'll buy a couple $3 million players. I don't know.
Well,
they don't have any.
I know.
It doesn't feel like they're always the most aggressive.
Trent Williams trade, pretty unique, but you give him credit on that.
I mean, he said this is the only place he's going to play.
Yeah, I know, unique, but they did do it.
They gave him a 3rd for the fucking best left tackle in the league. Every team in the league would have done that.
Yes, and then paid him.
Yeah, they don't have a problem paying you once you're sweet and on the team.
Yeah,
that's not their issue. Is not money. They have an unlimited amount of money. They're the San Francisco fucking 49ers. They're like the Rams, the Glazers, the fucking Yankees. The cash is not their issue. That's part of the reason people get mad. There's no like, well, the cash. There are no cash flow issues. The only cash flow issue right now is this contract that's hindering their cap. And people are going, are you using this to avoid paying some people some cash? We'll see. I mean, it's just, I think these next 48 hours are very telling. Like if we're going to the weekend, then they clearly are just like, yeah, we're not worried about it.
Well, I definitely think if Deshaun picks, at that point, I think we've run out of, to the comment earlier, at that point, if Deshaun picks a team and they're still waiting, then we've run out of things. What are we waiting on? Actually, I'll tell you exactly what we're waiting on then. Then we're waiting on Baker.
Well,
we're waiting on Matt Ryan.
Yeah,
we're waiting on whoever Deshaun displaced then.
One thing I want to see them do is to get a pick for this guy and then use like 2 threes and go land like, damn, they just landed some sweet defensive tackle, or damn, they just landed like, a Pro Bowl guard, or do something like that. Be like, okay. Yeah. And the guy costs $9 million, but he's under contract for the next couple years.
Right.
I like getting cost controls assets with my draft picks.
Like what Tampa just did with the Shaq
he's
Mason
under
trade.
contract. Yeah. I'm not fuck them picks, but I am utilize those picks as resources. Right.
Yes, I know. Which is you've always said that's more that is more what the Rams have done than free agency spending bonanza.
And there's really only been one sweet one of those that's happened at a high level. I'd say it would be because I think Shaq Mason went for a fifth. He didn't go for that much. I mean, Khalil to me is a high valued asset. Like any other guy that they could use that goes for a second or a third, but definitely a third. I'll be like, well, the Niners are missing out on this because they could use 2/3 to go land a guy. I mean, they got 3/3 or they got 2/3 now. They got 2/3. They got a second and 2/3. I would package both those 2/3 to get a sweet starting whatever.